Hello, everyone. This is Justin Smythe from nextbigtrade.com. This is the index review for August 8th, 2025. The S&P 500 had a strong rebound from last week's selling, closing higher 2.43% for the week. And importantly, the volume in the major indices bounced back strongly to the upside, and the major indices for the most part closed towards the highs of the week. So, we thought last week that a correction was finally starting in the S&P 500. We basically had been, looking for a pullback to the 30-week moving average for about the last 5 weeks or so, after this huge move coming out of the April bear market panic lows. And the correction had no follow through to the downside last week. And actually, stocks just bounced back. Um, and you can see that it's right at this, kind of support level from the highs from 2024. So basically, switching gears here and looking for more upside now in stocks. The S&P 500, the overall market really had kind of just a weak July, so we weren't totally off base here. And by the end of the previous week, the S&P 500 had basically gone sideways for the entire month, about 5 weeks. But things just turned around strongly last week. There was some good volume, good stage two breakout activity increased sharply, and there were some sector themes that were starting to work better last week. And I think those are reasons to kind of switch the mindset and look for a continuation to this rally now. And I think last week might be all that we're going to get to the downside for a few more weeks here if this rally starts to continue. So, there's been a lot of mixed action going on for about this last month, but last week was pretty constructive action, and we'll see if the market can build off that heading into next week. Looking at the daily chart of the S&P 500, you can see the selling really, erupted last week. Big volume to the downside, but as soon as the trading started this week, we got back into the gap from last week. There was a little bit, kind of up and down action during the week, but by the end of the week, closed at the highs of the week. We're still getting into the big selling from last week, but again, we kind of reclaimed both short-term moving averages, and as we'll see in a second, the technology indices went on to make new highs. Now, if you look at the equal weight, again, this shows how the market's just kind of gone sideways for about 5 weeks here. Right at the middle of June is where things kind of turned much more mixed. There hasn't been a ton of, super powerful stocks. Actually, quite a few stocks have had humongous pullbacks during this July timeframe, and it's really been just a very hit or miss period where there's just like if you got the right stocks, you've done pretty well, but there's also been the odds of getting a good stock have gone down dramatically from what happened back here, where it was much easier to get a big winning stock back here when the market went straight up for 2 months. And then this current period, you see the S&P 500, the equal weight's gone sideways. It's just been much choppier, and a lot of stocks have had huge pullbacks. So, but if you look at this here, the equal weight again is still holding this support area, and if it continues to do that and it starts to rally here, then the correction idea just might have ran out of time, and maybe we need to make some more new highs before the next correction. So again, it's been a very sloppy July. But if this is the start of another big move higher in August, then you definitely want to be on board. Maybe we'll get some better individual stock gains over the next month. And the technology indices again accelerated to the upside last week. Erased the losses from last week. Nasdaq 100 making new highs. Technology outperforming is bullish for the stock market, so that also happened last week. If you look at the daily chart, some pretty nice volume in the Nasdaq 100 on Thursday and Friday as well, to close the week and pushing to that new high. Again, so we've kind of had this slow grind in July, brief dip, and then we're starting to move higher again for the Nasdaq 100. Nasdaq Composite, same thing, technology outperforming, big upside volume. That's a positive for the stock market. Russell 2000 also did outperform the S&P 500 just slightly, and we'll take that as a positive. This has been where there's been a lot of weakness as well, but we'll see if this can build on it next week. And then looking at breadth, this is another area where you could say, if we're flipping to bullish here, this is the best setup that we have now since that May time period, where there's room for more stocks to move higher. And we've had similar breadth levels in the past. If you look at like February 2024, this led to more upside for stocks. Even if you look at like the tail end of the rally in 2024, this was a positive period for stocks heading into mid-December. And there's even other examples from last year, or actually, like if you look at June last year, we had a little bit of a pullback, and then we had more new highs into July. So this is an example of how you get down to here and you've got about a month left, and you've got more higher prices before the next correction. So again, we've been overbought for a few months now, but we finally have a dip here, and instead of kind of rolling over more this past week, the market held support and moved higher. And then we've got, if the breadth turns back to the upside, maybe we have 2, 3, 4 weeks left of this rally before we look for another correction. So just looking at it from the opposite situation, I know we were looking for the correction to continue, but it just does not seem like that's what's going to happen now based on what happened this past week. And we do actually have some room to move higher now. Short-term breadth, again, this has room to move higher as well. Biggest dip basically during this rally off the April lows now. So this could move higher and give stocks some more room to, overall to move. And then Nasdaq 100 breadth, percentage of stocks above the 50-day moving average. Again, biggest dip since May now, with some potential to move higher. And then finally the VIX. The VIX was another indicator where we got the bearish configuration last week, and then market rallies and then just completely erases that bearish configuration, and now we're back to the bullish configuration, closed below the 10-week moving average. And if volatility continues to move lower, then stocks are likely to move higher. So really, bottom line, just a lot of evidence this week that the market does not want to move into a correction here, and instead really just had a pullback last week. And now maybe we have more room to move to some further new highs. As we'll cover in the sector review, artificial intelligence appears to be one of the leading themes coming out of last week's action. Cryptocurrencies starting to shape up here. Bitcoin could be poised to break out. It's really struggled with this, falling through with this breakout for about a month now. But again, things are shaping up better here as of this past week, and we'll see if the market can build on this strength heading into next week.